Paul, the American team seems to be looking for an emotional, patriotic, passionate leader. And we've seen occasions where that works, guys like Paul Azinger or Seve on the European side. But we've seen plenty of passionate, patriotic guys who didn't actually work well as captains or who didn't get the win. You know, a Lanny Wadkins, a Hal Sutton, a Curtis Strange. Passion isn't enough for this job, though, is it?
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, I mean, look, the role of captaincy, as we know, has elevated and moved quite a lot in the last couple of decades into a very complex role in a lot of ways. And, you know, data is a big part of it. You know, dealing with players, certainly from a European context, who are spending all of their time pretty much in America now, has made it very difficult for us and more complex for us in some ways. And yeah, I mean, look, and dynamics come in, and that's what leadership is about. You got to deal with those dynamics and try to turn them around to your advantage. So it takes a lot of critical thinking outside the box, and you know, trying to mold together and unify guys that are making so much money nowadays, and that you know, have got so many things going on in their lives. It really is a skill, and sometimes it's a very difficult skill, believe me.
Paul, separate yourself, if you can, from your role as a strategic advisor for Team Europe and pretend you're sitting next to Brandel and Rich and put on your analyst hat. Just as a pick, your thoughts on Keegan Bradley, the choice to lead Team USA?
Surprised like everybody else when I heard. Not so much that Keegan is not going to be a great captain. We don't know that yet. But the fact that he's got no track record in captaining in teams, and the fact that he's only 38 years old, Damon, that's what is surprising. You know, I'm still kind of dumbfounded, and we are all in Europe, as to why there's more of a connection between President's Cup and Ryder Cup in terms of, you know, preparing captains through that. And obviously you've gone back to 2 ex-Ryder Cup captains in recent times to be captains of the President's Cup. And, you know, that surely, is that not a great opportunity to get guys ready for the Ryder Cup? Now, I know it's 2 different organizations, PGA Tour, PGA of America, but nonetheless, you know, it's the same bunch of players, and surprised that opportunity hasn't been taken. So it'll be interesting to see if Keegan is now going to be elevated in as maybe as a vice captain for this President's Cup or not. But it's a long road ahead when you haven't had the experience of it. And certainly we in Europe had felt very strongly that, you know, one of the lessons that we've learned over the years is that no matter who the player is or what record he may have and in many majors he may won, it's still really important that he will have, you know, taken off his spikes and been in a team room first before he elevates into being a Ryder Cup captain.
Paul, in the press conference, Keegan said that the first conversation he had with anyone about the job was when he was called to be told he had the job. Are you shocked that at no point was he asked how he would go about the job if he were to be given it?
Yeah, it does seem like a strange decision in a lot of ways, Eamon. I'd have to agree with that. And you know, as I say, the evidence of never having captained before, and he hasn't played in the team, either President's Cup or Ryder Cup, for 10 years. It really is strange. And particularly, you know, the way he was left out the last time, where he said he really wasn't part of the clique of the modern player. And maybe that was the reason why he was picked. Because he wasn't part of the inner circle, as it were, and the so-called task force and the group of people that seemed to rotate over the last 10 years in between President's Cups and Ryder Cups, and he wasn't part of it, and they wanted to try something new. If that's the case, I don't know if that was the right decision, because Steve Stricker did a phenomenal job when he captained in Whistling Straits. And you know, maybe it's just an overreaction to losing last year in Rome, but whatever the reasons are, they've obviously got good, solid reasons to do what they're doing. I'm not going to dismiss the fact that he can't be a good captain or learn the ropes very, very quickly. I like Keegan personally. I think he's a great guy, and what I really like about him is his passion. And there's a realness about him. There's an authenticity about him. He's got a lot of integrity, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think that will emanate really well and resonate really strongly with the crowd in particular. So there'll be a lot of things where he's going to hit the ground running with. The fact that he is a little bit of an outsider, particularly the way the public perceive golf maybe at the moment, may well work in his favor in terms of how the crowd will receive him. Because as we know, the crowd are going to be very, very important in New York. So there's a lot of things in his favor. But the lack of experience is the glaring omission, not the fact that it's Keegan or that he's picked at 38 years of age, but the fact that he hasn't been involved for so long, and the fact that he doesn't have any miles on the clock in terms of vice captaincy is a surprising thing.
You've talked about his passion, Paul, but you've also used words like dumbfounded and strange. Throw into the mix the possibility that he becomes a playing captain. What challenge would that be in this modern era of both captaining and playing in a Ryder Cup?
Well, put it this way, Damon, if America has a playing Ryder Cup captain, I think we would be quite happy in Europe if that was the case. The role has become so complex, so difficult. And, as we know in this game at the very, very elite level, the ability to focus is often the determining factor between success and not success. And if you're trying to go out there and play in a very, very hostile environment like a Ryder Cup is, combined with your head all over the place making decisions, it doesn't matter if you've a vice captain or anybody else in place, no matter how good that person may be. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. Almost impossible. I would say impossible. I know there's been talk about maybe Rory doing it in a dare manner, but I think that's very, very strong odds against. When he's realised now, certainly in Rome, the work that Luke has done behind the scenes and what is involved nowadays in becoming a Ryder Cup captain and executing the role of Ryder Cup captain, that it's very, very unlikely. I'd be really surprised if Keegan went down that route of trying to do both.
You captained against Tom Watson, whose tenure led to the creation of the task force, Paul. Is this taking a sledgehammer to how the task force has operated over the last 10 years in terms of having that small core group of guys who seem to have a revolving door through captaincies and vice captaincies, that it's a complete generational and attitude change?
Yeah, I know. I mean, my first reaction was, is this an overreaction when I heard about it? It was because, I know Rome didn't go very well, but look, we got hammered by a record margin in Whistling Straits. And one of the things we kept saying behind the scenes was not to overreact here. And not get it wrong. And then we put Henrik in as captain. And then that all went wrong as he went to live. And it was like, whoa, we really got egg on our face here. But again, it was a case of not overreacting. Both teams, whether it be Europe or whether it be America, have really struggled away from home. And that's why we're looking at things differently. And when I'm involved again now going into Bethpage is to try to help Luke and his team and his backroom team draw up a template for winning away. It's a very, very, very different dynamic winning away. And just because you win at home doesn't mean necessarily that the things you did, the structures you used are going to work away from home in a very, very different environment with different sets of dynamics in play. So we're going about this in a very, very different way. And our first step in doing that was to reappoint a captain who already had miles on the clock. And we didn't have to embed a new captain into the role, as well as with him having to play away from home. We felt that was a mistake of the past. So we're trying to go at things a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, I take all your points. Was it an overreaction? I don't know. Maybe it could be inspired. Who knows? We just got to let it kind of play out from here and where it's going to go. I think what he is going to bring is a lot of passion to the role. And I really do think the crowd in particular will unite in behind him. A guy who wears his heart on his sleeve comes across really, really well in the public. And his sheer honesty, as we saw in the Netflix drama there of not getting picked, the sheer honesty really resonated well and came across really well on TV. And, if you didn't like Keegan before, you certainly liked him more when you saw him, how he dealt with such, really tough news that he got in front of his family. And his final words were, come on, we'll have to take this in the chin and, we still got to unite behind America. And, that resonates a lot. And that certainly pulls on the heartstrings. And, full credit to him for how he reacted there, because that was all live. That wasn't orchestrated in any way. And I thought, that was the best bit that I've seen in the 2 episodes or 2 series that we've seen of Netflix. That little snapshot of what he did right there, that 10 seconds, 15 seconds as he got the news, just epitomized a lot about Keegan and who he is as a person. So interesting to see if he kind of takes that and runs with it and makes it into a big part of his captaincy.
Paul, we always appreciate your insights. Bethpage will be loud and fascinating. Thanks so much for the time.
You're welcome, guys. Thanks. See you soon.